Welcome back, sixth graders. This is chapter 1, lesson 2. So you should have your packet out in front of you, your pencil, your highlighters, maybe a colored pen, or some special things we have you annotate. And this is going to be page 4 of your packet. We'll be looking at how does a historian do his or her work? What are their tools? What are some common things that all historians around the world use? First thing that's important in studying history is evidence. When you read history text, they're not making these things up. We don't write books about mummies because someone had a dream about a mummy. It's because they've discovered hard proof that mummies, or that the Egyptians had a special process of preserving their dead. So it's extremely important that when historians make a claim, that they have the proof to back it up. Proof can be in artifacts and fossils. It could be written evidence. It could be pictures. It could be video in more modern times. There's a lot of evidence to pull from that we're going to talk about in the next few slides. Hey guys, so now we're going to look at the difference between primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are accounts of an event created by someone who witnessed or took part in it. So that could be a speech, that could be a map drawn by someone who was actually there on the ground witnessing the land, or traveling in a ship drawing maps. That could be photographs. It could be diary entries, journal entries, letters written to people. And this is the most reliable source because there's no bias in it. A primary source is what it is. The conclusions we draw from these sources can be biased, but the source itself isn't. For example, how do we know Abraham Lincoln wore a stovepipe hat? Well, we literally have a picture of it. It's one of the early pictures we have in American history. So this isn't some historian making up, or he heard a story that his grandma told him that Abraham Lincoln used to wear this kind of hat. No, we have a literal picture of it taking place. Now that's different from secondary sources. That's information gathered by someone who did not take part or witness the event. For example, in world history, we're going to be talking about civilizations that existed hundreds and thousands of years ago. Well, people that lived in ancient Egypt or ancient Mesopotamia, they're not alive anymore. So we can't use them as primary sources. We can only use the things they left behind to then write or produce information about them. For example, we know we have artifacts of mummies that people find in the pyramids in Egypt. So we can use that information to write about mummies, even though no one alive on this planet was there when those mummies were placed in the tomb thousands of years ago. Okay, so some common secondary source information. Your textbook is a great example of a secondary source. History magazines, even most history books are written by people who weren't actually there at the event. They're writing about the event well after it happened. Okay.
Okay, guys, now we are going to talk about questions that you should be asking about your sources. The first question that you'd want to ask is it reliable? Where, when, and why was this created? I'm sure that your teachers along the years have taught you that when you go to Google, you can't use Wikipedia because it is not a reliable source. So you need to look at your source and first assess as to whether it is reliable. The next question you'd want to say is, what is the point of view? What is the author's view on life or an event? Are they biased? Okay, bias is an unreasoned emotional judgment about people and events. I'm going to give you an example that I know you all are going to get. You have seen people who they're watching their sporting event and their favorite team gets called on for something that they don't agree with the ref, and they start yelling and screaming at the ref. That is biased. They are very upset that their team got called on and they want to yell at the ref for it. That is an emotional judgment that is unreasoned about the people or events that took place. Okay, making inferences. Historians use information from primary and secondary sources to choose the most likely interpretation from the evidence at hand. All these pictures, okay? Looking at history, historians gather information and data and write about it in a scholarly journal or magazine, or one that is concerned with learning and research. Focusing research. Some historians keep their focus very narrow, while others focus on broader subjects, keeping in mind that every time they do this, they are looking at whether their sources are reliable, whether there is evidence, what is the author's point of view, and if there is bias in it.
All right, so they may have looked at all the evidence, but they haven't made a decision yet. So if you're moving forward and you're moving through this process, after you've gathered everything, you've got to make a decision. It's called a conclusion. So the final decision, after you've looked at all those resources, you've looked at the primary sources, you've looked at the secondary sources, you've decided if these sources were reliable, did they tell the truth? Is it a good source? Is it maybe not such a good source, but maybe it does give us a picture maybe of what's going on, but maybe they were biased against it. Like Ms. Tickle said, their team could be a really bad team and make a lot of mistakes, but because they love their team, they had a biased point of view. So put all those things together and use your evidence and you use your facts and then you use your reasoning to make a judgment. And that's called drawing your conclusion. And when you get to that point, then you have taken all those pieces and put them together and you have made an interpretation. Now, it's an interpretation because I wasn't actually there. I can look at everything that's been written about a mummy and I can look at all the information and I can make a judgment, make an interpretation, but I might be wrong. So, however, good historians will look at all the resources and they can explain both sides of their interpretation and they can see how both sides could be correct. I'll give you another example like Ms. Tickle did. So if I grew up in a household where we didn't have any animals and no pets, and you grow up in a household that has big dogs, like beautiful labs and big collies, and you have really big dogs at your house. Well, you are going to think that big dogs are awesome. They're the best thing in the world. I'm going to see a big dog, and because I didn't grow up with them, I might be afraid of a dog. And you would say, why are you afraid of this dog? And I would say, because I don't know anything about dogs. I don't like dogs. They're scary. I have made an interpretation based on my past that big dogs are scary. You've made an interpretation based on your past that big dogs are awesome. They're so fluffy and cuddly and they protect you and they can keep snakes away. Or, just be your friend and run around in the yard and play with you and they can, just hang out with you. So we both are who's right. Am I right for being afraid because I don't really know the doggy? Or are you right that all dogs are great because you grew up with dogs? That's where the arguing starts happening with historians over who's right and who's wrong. That point of view, that bias that they have. So we're going to use all our resources this year. We're going to look at different things. You get to make some decisions all throughout the year. Your decision may be different from mine, and that's okay. It could be different from Mr. Cofield's or Mr. Miller's or Ms. Tickle's. It could all be different. But if you can back it up with evidence, then we're going to support that decision. We're going to help you see both sides and then move forward with your interpretation. So here's something for you to consider. Is that 3 or 4? Do you see 4 logs there or do you see 3 logs there? How about writing that on your paper for us? Make a 3 or a 4 right there and let me know how many you actually see. Because I guarantee you when we get to class, everybody's going to see something different. Nobody will see 2 or 5, but they'll be different. 4s and 3s. Okay, hot question. Hot question. Higher order thinking questions. So all of the history teachers, we expect the same thing. For your higher order thinking question, we need you to restate the prompt. we need you to use 3 complete sentences with punctuation. And if at all possible, please throw in some vocab. We love vocabulary. That lets me know that you know what we're talking about, okay? So here's your question. Explain why some historians differ in their interpretation of historical events. I don't necessarily want examples. I want you to explain using vocabulary words why they would be different. Not an example. I don't want you to pick anything like the dogs or something like that. I want you to use vocabulary and explain to me why we feel differently. Okay? All right, I can't wait to see your answers. I'm super excited about this. I'm getting into some fun stuff. All right, see you later, historians. Bye.